Welcome everyone to the scientific session 2 in day 2 of the conference. And this session is focused on local energy markets. My name is Christopher. I'm based in Singapore at the National University of Singapore in a think tank called the Energy Studies Institute. So it's actually afternoon over here, but it's nice to connect. And it's a pity that the event, which was supposed to take place physically in Singapore, had to be cancelled. But I'm glad that the organizers are able to arrange this conference, which is a very important conference, over the internet. I think it embodies what connectivity is about. Beyond physical connectivity, we can also connect in other ways. And with technology, it's easier to connect these days. So I will start by introducing the speakers, and then I'll do some housekeeping just to let you know what and how we're going to structure this panel. So we have 3 speakers today, and the first speaker is Dr. Fabio Indeo from the Nato Defense College Foundation based in Italy. And then the second speaker is Ms. Helena Uhde. She's based in China at the Center for Energy and Environmental Policy Research at Beijing Institute of Technology. But I understand that she's actually currently based in Europe. So nice to see you both. And then the third speaker, I'm not sure whether he's online right now, is Mr. Konrad Zawodzinski. He's back. Okay. He's from Kozminski University in Poland. Right. So we have 3 speakers, and because of that, we will have a lot more time for the speakers to present. And I've decided to give each one of them 15 minutes. And then after the 3 presentations, we will have the question and answer session after all the 3 have spoken. And I would invite all of you to use the chat box to type in your questions, and then we will collect them, and we will then pose the questions to the participants, right? As backup, because sometimes technology can fail, I have 2 backup moderators. In case my internet gets cut off, somebody will step in. His name is Mr. William Becker. And in the unlikely event that he is also cut off, Fabio here will help step in to moderate, right? So after this event is over, I would like to remind all of you that there will be a 10 minutes break, followed by a virtual coffee session. I would like to invite everyone to join in. It's an opportunity to meet participants informally and to chat. Right. So from me, the final point, which is also a very important one, is I would like to draw your attention to the ASEAN Sustainability Connectivity Portal. I'm going to post the link under chat. And this is a very useful tool for you to understand the kind of connections that is taking place between Asia and Europe. So it covers 59 countries with 49 indicators, cover a range of sectors from the physical trade and services to the economic and financial sector, and then also the political, institutional, people-to-people linkages. And you can even download the data set, which is available on Excel. So I would recommend all of you to take a look, just so that you can have a deeper understanding of the kind of connection between the two regions. So without taking up further time, I would like to invite the first speaker, Dr. Fabio Indeo, to speak. And while he's speaking, myself and the two other speakers will mute our audio and switch off our video. So Fabio, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Christopher. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to attend this important event, this virtual event. I hope that, sorry, my presentation, I'm trying to have some problems with the PowerPoint presentation. So I start to discuss about how my
Okay, here's the help desk. Seems that we lost Fabio.
So I'm going to upload the presentation of Fabio because I got it also. So when he's back, he can, if he still has trouble with sharing his presentation, I can share my screen so you can see the presentation and he can present. Just in case, I'm trying to join him.
Okay, so have we lost him completely? Should we wait for him? Okay, so in the interest of time management, I would suggest we move on to the next speaker first. I'm terribly sorry about that. So perhaps, Helena, if you are ready, would you like to do the presentation first?
Okay, no problem.
Oh, hang on.
Oh, okay, he's back.
Okay. Fabio, are you okay?
Yes, okay. Only a problem with the PowerPoint presentation. Maybe if Helena can speak before me, and I'm trying to solve this problem.
Okay.
That's okay for you?
Yes, it's okay for me.
Okay.
Helena,
sorry.
would you like to start first?
Yes. But now I also have a problem to share.
Yeah.
Yeah. Firefox cannot allow permanent access to your screen. Oh, I think it's working now, right? Are you able to see my screen?
No. Yeah.
No.
We can see your screen. So please
Okay.
double click on the Helena screen share so you can see it in a large.
Okay. Okay. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks to Christopher for the short introduction. My name is Helena Uhde. I'm a PhD student, usually in Beijing, currently based in Germany. And yeah, I'm very happy to join this important conference. Today, I'm going to talk about local electricity markets in the EU and in China. As my research topic is also distributed energy and local electricity markets, mainly in China, but also I do some comparisons with the EU. In my presentation, the term local really means the local community or the distribution grid, a neighborhood market. I'm saying this now because local energy markets is often used in different terms. As I think that the audience comes from very different backgrounds, my presentation is going to be yeah, more like an introduction into the topic. So first, I would like to talk a bit about electricity, as most people don't really think about what's behind the power circuit, where the electricity comes from, right? We use electricity as light, we use electricity to charge our mobile phones, but we don't really care about, as a consumer, we're mostly passive, we don't really care about what happens behind the power socket. And actually, that also makes sense when we look at how the traditional electricity systems look like. So here we have a very simplified version of an electricity system, where we have the big generation plants, mostly fossil fuel fired. On the left side, we have high voltage, long transmission lines, lower voltage distribution lines who transfer the electricity to the consumers. The consumers, residential consumers, industrial, commercial consumers, agriculture, they are mostly passive. They start to do some, to become more active, but still maybe most consumers have a very passive role in the system. In the traditional system, the generation, transmission, and distribution is often in the hand of few state-owned enterprises. In China, we still see this a lot, but also in Europe, we see this a lot. There's a unidirectional power flow, so the electricity only flows into one direction. It is centrally hierarchical organized, and as I already said, the consumers have a passive position here. But now the electricity system is changing. So in order to increase the competition, governments, whether we look to Europe or whether we look to China, they started unbundling processes. So in the EU, they started around 2000, and in China a bit later, to bring more competition into the system and to unbundle generation, transmission.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Helena.
Yeah.
The share screen for your slides doesn't seem to be changing. Yeah, so can you just switch off the share screen and then restart it? We are seeing only your first page.
Oh, yeah.
Just for everyone to know, the presentations are actually available on the website. William has posted a link under the chat where you can look at the individual presentations. You can access it there directly. To keep things simple, would the presenters be to do the presentation without the slides? And for those people who need the slides, there's a link under the chat column. You can download the slide to refer to them while they are speaking or after this session. Again, on behalf of the organizers, I apologize for this. And in the interest of time, I think it's better if we just start quickly with Fabio again.
Okay.
And because some time has passed, I would suggest, if possible, to keep your presentation shorter. Initially, I mentioned 15 minutes, but try to do it, say, 12 minutes. Okay?
Okay, I will try.
Yeah, okay, so let's start with Fabio first. Let's restart the process. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So my presentation is mainly focused on ASEAN EU cooperation, especially in the energy sector, and how these two regional blocks can share some similarities in order to achieve their energy security condition. First of all, we can highlight that the energy dimension is one of the main relevant fields of cooperation between ASEAN and the EU, especially because they are committed to implement a decarbonization process aimed to cut polluting emissions, combating climate change and negative effects. In the ASEAN EU Plan of Action 2018-2022, some of the key priorities have been highlighted, especially how this cooperation between EU and ASEAN in order to share best practices to promote energy access, energy security, and to support their access in competitive way to the global energy markets, as well as to contribute to the energy efficiency and to adopt energy efficiency measures and to adopt renewable energy sources and clean energy programs in order to achieve, as you know, the so-called energy security, in order to have regular energy flows without interruption at moderated prices. And they also share the same approach in terms of diversification of the energy mix in order to increase the share of clean electricity produced by solar, by wind, by renewable energy sources, and to fuel a regional energy grid with renewable energy sources, mainly to satisfy the domestic energy demands. In my slides, I would like to point out that EU and ASEAN share a similar energy landscape, characterized by the depletion of existing hydrocarbon reserves and high energy demand, and which lead to a scenario of rising energy imports. So it is necessary to diversify the energy mix, not only and the energy imports, not only to reduce the dependence on importers, such as Russia in the case of the European Union, but also to make the energy system more sustainable. And the need of energy concerning ASEAN is one of the main challenging tasks, because ASEAN is one of the most dynamic and the fastest growing economic region in the world. If ASEAN was a region, it would be the world's 5th largest economy. So if we consider that by 2025 there will be an increase of the population which will lead a 4% annual growth in energy demand until 2025, and electricity demand will double in the next 5 years, it is necessary to ensure the energy security of the region. Also because energy is the key to realize the Asian economic community, which call for a well-connected ASEAN to drive an integrated, competitive, and resilient region. So the demand in primary energy is expected to grow to satisfy the rising domestic need. The problem is that in spite of coal, even if there are rising demand in primary energy will be satisfied with, especially with coal. But also coal reserves are lower, and natural gas and oil production in the region and oil reserves in the region are decreasing. So it will be necessary to increase imports from abroad, and especially imports in terms of hydrocarbons, oil, natural gas, and coal. Especially because even if now some Asian countries such as Malaysia and Indonesia are exporters of natural gas, in the next decade they become a net gas importer. So importing oil, natural gas, and coal from abroad will rise polluting emissions and also have a huge leverage in the national budget, depriving the national budget of important resources. So in this context, I believe that, and not only me, I believe that renewable energy sources appear the best option to increase the regional energy security, ensuring greater diversification, reducing the share of the imported fuels. Also because if we consider the plan of action for energy cooperation, Asian region tried to achieve the ambitious goal to achieve 23% of renewable energy sources in total primary energy supply by 2005. So this is a real challenge for the region, a real challenge, because according to the reference scenario, the Asian region renewable share in total primary energy supply by 2025 is expected to increase to just under 17%. So that means that it will be necessary to close the 6 percentage point gap between the reference case and 23% aspirational target, further increasing renewable production. So it will be necessary to increase investment, to increase the political commitment in order to increase the production of renewable energy sources. And when in my research, I try to highlight the similarities between EU and Asian, we can compare some projects such as the Asian power grid with the EU Mediterranean electricity ring, because they are similar in order to achieve the same goal, in order to try to develop a wider framework of regional diversification, regional energy integration, promoting interconnectivity, in the case of Europe, between the two shores of the Mediterranean, in order to increase the share of clean electricity in order to satisfy the rising demand. But before to speak about this point, the shared commitment of EU and Asian to sign and support the Paris climate deal show their strategic interest to increase the use of renewable energy sources in the energy mix, and their mutual engagement to address climate change, and also considering how Asian region is highly vulnerable to climate change. How you can see in my slides, I try to compare the two flagship projects of Asian and European Union. First of all, the Asian Power Grid is the flagship initiative of the Asian region, and it is conceived as an inclusive initiative, moving from a close-border bilateral dimension, then expanded to a sub-regional basis, and finally to a regional total integrated regional system. And the APG will become the centerpiece of the regional power architecture, encompassing all the 10 member countries which are members of ASEAN. The main goal is to enhance electricity trade across regional borders, and you can see in the slides the different projects, but I want to point your attention to the fact that this is an interest project of regional cooperation, especially because it will be able to combine different renewable energy sources that Asian countries are able to produce, also taking into account the different energy needs and the composition of the energy mix of the different countries. For instance, ASEAN region can benefit of a huge and differentiated renewable potential, which can support this ambitious strategy to increase endogenous domestic production of clean electricity. For instance, Laos is the leading Asian countries about hydropower potential. Moreover, Southeast Asia is home to 25% of the world geothermal generation capacity, mainly located in the Philippines and Indonesia. So it is possible to combine this different production of renewable energy sources in an integrated regional grid in order to satisfy the domestic energy needs with clean electricity, also promoting a wider framework of cooperation. Vietnam, another case in the huge potential in solar power plants. And the landscape of political cooperation and good relations which characterize Asian region appear the main precondition of this concerning the success in the implementation of the Asian Power Grid project. After this project, I try to describe the project which characterized the European Union. And in the case of northern countries of the European Union, Nordic countries are able to develop energy cooperation and to realize the Northern Electricity Ring, which can an electricity interconnection which is mainly fueled with wind. On the other hand, in the southern shore of the European Union, the idea to realize an integrated energy grid in the southern shore of the Mediterranean, to realize the so-called Mediterranean electricity ring, the Mediterranean Solar Plan, this project have been seriously affected by the condition of instability in North Africa following the so-called Arab Spring events. So these countries in North Africa, but also in the Sahel, have been identified as a potential producers of clean electricity in order to meet the European Union energy needs with clean electricity, but also as a driver in order to promote economic growth, political and social development in the southern shore of the Mediterranean. So a kind of wider framework. And I suggest you to look at the slide concerning the Mediterranean electricity ring, because if there are three energy paths from North Africa to the European Union, only one electricity link is currently operating from Morocco to Spain, and it is impossible until now to close the ring to realize an interconnected transmission system encompassing all countries in the region, because it's impossible to close the ring given the condition of instability. The condition of instability in Libya hampered the realization of electricity ring with Algeria, Egypt and Tunisia, as well as the situation of instability in Syria hamper the realization of an electricity interconnection on the eastern part of the Mediterranean. So in the case of natural gas, I point out the attention on the Trans-Asian gas pipeline to realize an regional system of based on natural gas, and in order to physically link all the natural gas infrastructure, overland pipelines, underwater pipelines, and LNG terminals and regasification terminals. It is interesting in the case of Asian region that first of all, there will be an expected growth of LNG demand. Asian region will become the third LNG importer in the world. In order to meet this growing demand of LNG, will be necessary to increase import, but also to reshape the current energy system. So the main exporter in the region, such as Malaysia and Indonesia, could reorient their natural gas production to the regional market, increasing interconnectivity and promoting a regional cooperation based on mutual trust, which could be a good point as strengthened for the political success of the Asian political project, and in order to establish the economic community. Concerning the European Union, concerning gas, the European Union has been engaged to develop LNG terminals. Currently, there are 25 LNG terminals in the European Union, and in 2019, 27% of European Union natural gas imports are in LNG forms. So 108 billion cubic meters of natural gas. The problem is that only 2 years ago, with a nominal capacity of 200 billion cubic meters of natural gas in terms of existent LNG terminals, only 1/4 of natural gas will be delivered to the European Union. Now, the share of LNG imports are doubled from 50 to 100 billion cubic meters of natural gas, but it's not enough. It is necessary to realize regional or intra-regional interconnectors in order to distribute natural gas in the European Union in order to satisfy the different national energy needs. And you can find in the slide one of the main successful examples in the European Union, the North-South corridor from the LNG facilities in Poland and in Lithuania, with the interconnection crossing Central and Eastern Europe, and other southern LNG terminals in Croatia and Italy, in order to implement this project of regional interconnectivity. So it's important, are two significant examples. Sorry. In conclusion, because that I think that my time is ended. How it's possible to develop to further improve energy cooperation between EU and Asian. This regional bloc, political regional bloc, should align their position in the international fora, pursuing a comprehensive approach to tackle the impact of climate change and promoting sustainable development as a promising framework of enhanced cooperation. So we can consider their joint support to the Paris Climate Deal as a profitable window of strategic opportunity, which allow them to legitimize their efforts to diversify the energy mix and to increase the domestic and regional production of renewable energy production. I believe that the good framework of political cooperation in the Asian region is the good card, the strength card, in order to promote this profitable interconnectivity, which could be a short-term target to achieve in the medium term, considering the huge potential to really use clean electricity. And I believe that all new consideration concerning the new energy scenario emerging after COVID-19 global impact could be, I think it could be interesting to debate with all the listeners and other people, or all the audience, about the effects of the COVID-19 also in the energy cooperation between EU and Asian. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Fabio. In the interest of time, I will quickly move on to the next speaker, Helena. Helena, are you ready for the presentation? Yeah, so we will be doing the presentations without the slides. Again, I will repeat that if you need to have access to the slides, you can go to the website where the presentation slides are available. So Helena, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. So yeah, please look at the slides on the website or in the link that is posted in the chat. After Fabio talked about connectivity, energy connectivity on the more regional, international level, I'm going to talk about the local level. So I said the energy system is changing a lot. The government is helping to unbundle the energy system to increase the competitions of the sector. So there are a lot more actors there. Renewable energy is increasing, whether we look at China or we look at Europe. So I'm going to talk about local electricity markets in the EU and in China. Local electricity markets are a form of electricity exchange on a very local level. So we look at a neighborhood or an industrial park. It's an electricity exchange inside the distribution grid. The participants, different from wholesale markets, are either consumers or small-scale energy generators. Maybe the consumers also produce their own electricity, then they're called prosumers. And we can think of it rather of a software than a real physical exchange of electricity. So this is research. It's quite the research papers that were published are increasing in the last years, and there's a lot of debate going on. There are lots of pilot projects also going on. But when we look at the regulation side, whether we look at the regulation side in the EU or in China, the term local electricity market is not used. So in the EU, in the electricity directives and in the clean energy package for all Europeans, we find different terms. We find the term renewable energy community, citizens energy community, active consumers, and renewable self-consumer. So the regulators realized that there are more active consumers. There are more consumers who maybe put solar on their rooftops. and want to share their electricity with other people, or also want to sell electricity or feed it back to the grid. In China, we can also see development like this. In China, there's a big electricity market reform going on since 2015. And in the last couple of years, in 2017, 2018, there were some policies called Outline of the Pilot Program for Distributed Power Generation Market Trading and Distributed Generation Management Measures. And here they talk about distributed energy owners. These are mostly industrial or commercial consumers who maybe produce their own distributed energy. And yeah, the term trading pilots for distributed power generation pops up. So the government is trying to develop trading pilots for electricity trading on the local level. So we have these concepts which are which have different names in the two jurisdictions in the EU and in China. And also there are lots and lots of pilot projects, and they're very diverse, especially in the EU, where the European Union sets a policy, and then in the different countries it's implemented in a different way. But also in China, you have the central government who maybe sets a policy, but then in each province, the policy might be implemented in a different way. So the participants in the European Union, renewable self-consumers, in the pilot projects, we find mostly residential consumers, although there are also industrial or commercial consumers participating, but mostly we talk about residential consumers. While in China, in these pilot projects, we mostly have commercial or industrial consumers participating. The market mechanisms in the European Union are also very diverse, as there are different project developers. You have peer-to-peer mechanisms where the participants of the markets directly exchange electricity with each other. There are aggregator mechanisms. You have auctions where there's a central market operator. In China, the government gave 3 different options: direct trading between sellers and purchasers, so between distributed energy owners and the consumers, industrial consumers, where you have a direct trade, and then the grid company has still a veto right if the electricity grid is not able to transmit that amount of electricity. You have entrusted sales, where the distributed energy owner sells the electricity to the grid company, and then the grid company sells it to the consumer. And you have sales to the grid, which is not really a market mechanism, but rather a feed-in system where the distributed energy owner just sells the electricity to a fixed price back to the grid company. In the European Union, there are hundreds of pilot projects, often funded by the European Union. You have projects like Empower, P2P Smart Test, EcoGrid, Nobel. There are lots of different projects with different objectives also. Often you want to try different market mechanisms, and just experiment with local electricity markets. In China, in 2019, the central government announced 26 pilot projects, which are in different states of implementation. There's quite some information to find about a project in Henan, Hebei, but it's difficult to actually get information about the other projects. But it's always, the projects were selected by the central government, and then you have different project developer on the local ground. Yeah, so in the European Union, you have the cooperation of different stakeholders. Often the universities or research organizations are driving forces to experiment with these pilots. You have the cooperation between the research with industry partners and also with the grid companies. While in China, usually the government is at the center of the projects, compared to in the EU, the research organization. And then you also have, of course, a cooperation between government, industry, and research organizations. So what does it mean for connectivity? I mean, one part is that you have more active consumers in these local electricity markets and a connectivity between consumers and electricity producers, between the grid. But here today we talk about the connectivity between the European Union and China. And I think it's very important to not just talk about the big international energy governance topic, but also about the local level of energy governance, because both China, the EU, and also most of the other countries in the world, they have an increasing share of intermittent renewable energy sources. So system flexibility is really a key issue, and the exchange on local electricity markets, but also other demand response mechanism, other innovative solutions to increase flexibility in the system and to help the integration of demand-side resources are very important in those countries and regions. So I think it's very important to have an exchange, conferences like this to talk about experiences in EU and China, to visit pilot projects and to learn from the experiences between the projects. I think it's good to have the local stakeholders involved in the overall global energy transition. Okay, that's already from my side. I hope you can see the slides later on the website or in the link, and I'm happy to hear your questions later on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Helena. Fabio, earlier in his presentation, gave a very nice macro view of the energy developments in the EU and in ASEAN. And he focused on regional infrastructure and renewable energy. And in your case, you did a very deep dive into 2 local markets, and you focused on smart grids, decentralized systems, and issues related to, I guess, metering as well. So this is a very nice contrast, and I think it adds a lot more sort of scope to our discussion later. And next, I would like to invite Konrad to give his presentation. Because of potential technical difficulties, he will also do it without slides as well. So thank you, Konrad. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to talk remotely to all of you. It is with a regret that we can't make it to appear in person in Singapore. But anyway, I'm honored to attend this conference. Following the fairly, I would say, reassuring presentations of Helena and Fabio, I'm under the impression that mine might be a little bit a kind of twist here, because I will be speaking of regulatory regime, which could as well be construed as having a potential, dubious potential, to put it that way. And that is to say, I'm going to talk about international interconnectivity via interconnectors. So I'll be focusing on interconnecting infrastructure in gas and electricity markets. And I will start off by stating that the interconnectors are critical pieces of infrastructure from a viewpoint of international trade. I will just briefly indicate the convergence between the free trade agreement that the European Union and Singapore concluded and EU market regulations. At the same time, I will conclude by noting the certain disruptions in how the EU market regulations and the EU obligations regarding the free trade unraveled, played out in the past. Without getting into too much of a detail and legal thinking here and legal definitions, I would basically like to indicate that both in the energy and gas markets, interconnectors are used as gateways to the common market, and they are a key to the business of manufacturers. That is to say, they're critical in order to allow the offtake of the manufactured energy and produced natural gas. There's one major difference between legal regime for electricity and gas. That is to say, the definition of interconnector for the gas industry does capture gas pipelines with third countries and subjects them to the EU regulatory framework. But clearly gives rise to international law challenges, which involve international territorial jurisdiction, the questions of territorial jurisdiction from a viewpoint of international law and commitments like UNCLOS, which clearly means the maritime law, international law of the seas, and the challenges pertaining thereto. And then a question of jurisdictional link and the nuance between the jurisdictional link and the territorial reach of decision-making powers and practice. Quite as much as EU energy market regulations, the free trade agreement also is also committed to fostering regulatory, to fostering the removal and reduction of tariffs as well as non-tariff barriers. And the parties, that is to say Singapore and the EU, should foster regulatory convergence towards international or regional standards. The principle on which the free trade agreement are based involve creating the terms and conditions and procedures for the connection and access to electricity transmission grids, and making sure that those are transparent and do not discriminate against suppliers of the other party. So they should be transparent and non-discriminatory. These are with certain exceptions regarding energy security, without room of for arbitrary and unjustifiable discrimination. Both parties can adopt measures that are necessary for the safe operation of energy networks or safety of energy supplies. In either instance, the licensing procedures should be fair, equitable, non-discriminatory, and transparent again. Similar principles are reflected in the free trade agreement and the provisions regarding customs and trade facilitation. The language of those provisions isn't very far from what we have in the WTO law. So we clearly see that in the provision of GATT and Article 11, the parties stipulated no prohibitions or restrictions other than duties and taxes and all other charges, whether made effective through quotas, import or export licenses, or other measures. And this clearly underpins the thinking and the reasoning behind the provisions of a free trade agreement between Singapore and the EU. We clearly note that the principle of non-discrimination is one of the fundamental principles of EU law enshrined in the treaties and taken very seriously in EU jurisprudence, in the jurisprudence of the European Court of Justice of the European Union. That is also noteworthy with respect to access to infrastructure, where the principle of non-discrimination applies to horizontal relations. That's which means between the infrastructure operator and the undertaking that wishes to book the capacities of this piece of infrastructure. Those general principles basically are only strengthened by antitrust laws, where it basically means that it would be in breach of both competition law and energy market regulations to discriminate market participants. This refers not only to the horizontal, but also vertical relations. So the principle of non-discrimination is also binding upon the states and any state-appointed bodies, agencies, which might wish to confer various obligations, including public relations, services of general economic interest. Any action like that should not discriminate between the undertakings as regards the rights obligations. That is also enshrined in the Gas Market Directive. What I found interesting, though, is that the EU is also looking at, especially in the gas market regulations, is minded to take a closer look at the dealings with third countries, especially those that the businesses of which might upset the balance of energy security, that might be viewed as detrimental, potentially detrimental to the security of supplies. And the references to that can clearly be seen in Gas Market Directive from the very beginning, in the third Gas Market Directive following Amendment 32, and also it can be seen with respect to energy market when we say that the measures can be adopted without prejudice to the competence that member states retain in relation to third countries. Also, we see that vertical non-discrimination in measures related to gas market does not only concern purely regulatory measures, but it is also present in various other measures safeguarding the integrity and transparency of market, such as state aid, such as certification of third country transmission system operator, third country investor scrutiny in the Hydrocarbon Directive, or FDI screening under fairly recently enacted regulation on FDI screening as said. Probably one of the most controversial issues here would be regulatory exemptions. So regulatory exemptions are meant to be exceptional measures that allow, in principle, a national regulator acting in agreement with the European Commission. That is the most typical setup for gas market, or in the electricity market, the powers of European Commission smaller here, but in general, there is an assumption of cooperation and co-decision making on the national and European level here. And the assumption or the principle underpinning the very institution of regulatory exemption is to allow the investors to overcome the risk which is clearly pertinent to capital-intensive investments in the energy infrastructure. Such an exemption can be granted for a definite period of time in order for the investor to recoup the investment outlays that it has made. A natural question would be, what is actually investor exempt from? What does this exemption apply to? So the exemption refers to third-party access and tariff regulation. Third-party access means that the investor, or exemption from the said access for the third party, means that the investor might, for example, allow its own affiliates to book a certain part of the capacities of that infrastructure, so as to allow the investor a steady income over the period of, for example, 20 years, that would allow to cover the costs of this investment. The exemption can have certain commitments, conditions and commitments attached thereto. These are often requested by the European Commission. Conditions often encompass restrictions in booking the capacities. Examples of such commitments, such conditions, can be seen, for example, with reference to the LNG terminals, or maximum import through unregulated capacities. So through the capacities that are exempt, that enjoy the exemption from the gas market regulation. That can be seen with reference to the case of Opal gas pipeline in Germany. There are also two cases related to regulatory exemptions before the European Court of Justice. One of them is about a refusal to grant the regulatory exemption for an interconnector. The other is an appeal regarding the said gas pipeline in Germany, Opal gas pipeline in Germany. What is, as a matter of fact, very controversial is the nature of obligations from a viewpoint of fostering international business for third states investor is not the procedure of adopting and granting those regulatory exemptions, but actually those commitments that can be attached to them. The decision regarding the Opal gas pipeline, subsequently amended, was, as a matter of fact, reviewed the subject matter of a WTO panel of the settlement dispute dispute settlement body. Sorry, and in that report, the condition regarding the limitation on imports from the Russian Federation was found in breach. Was found to have constituted a breach of WTO laws. So we can see that, and given the similarity, the shared axiological framework of the free trade agreement between Singapore and the EU and the WTO laws, we can clearly see that in this instance, or as far as the safeguarding of interests of Singaporean investors in the EU is concerned, then such commitments should also be dealt with carefully and handed out in a manner that sees a broader spectrum, also sees the implications of international law obligations. And I would only like to conclude by noting that the international law has a, I would say, dual nature or dual character from a viewpoint of EU law. It definitely forms a part of the EU legal order, but at the same time, its direct applicability does not mean it has direct effect, which means that a decision of the European Commission, which might be in breach of WTO laws or a free trade agreement, may not necessarily be invalidated by the court because of this incompatibility, because of non-compliance with the said free trade agreement. The reason behind it is that the Court of Justice happened to find, with respect to the World Trade Organization agreements, that those lack nature, that the nature and broad logic of those agreements basically results in the lack of direct effect. And similarly, the court found for finding a similar determination with respect to UNCLOS, so the international law of the seas, stating that it does not grant unconditional and sufficiently precise rights to an individual. So, being enthusiastic about international cooperation as I am, at the same time, I believe that in the decision-making, one has to exercise a certain dose of prudency and care so as to make sure that the understandable concerns regarding the security of supplies and gas market stability, energy market, the distorted functioning of energy markets in general, are balanced and addressed in a manner that is compliant and compatible with international laws and obligations entered into under the free trade agreements that EU has, and rightly so, been concluding for quite a few years already, including a fairly recent one executed with Singapore. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We have about 15-20 minutes left. The last presentation is again quite different from the first two presentations. It's another deep dive, the legal dimensions of the energy trade. It's quite good having these three different presentations because it shows the scope of research that's out there when we talk about energy issues. And I think these presentations complement each other because we are looking at the macro level, the micro level, and also the legal dimension of the energy trade, right? So now, in the interest of time, I will open the floor. I will take a look at the Q&A questions and let the presenters respond to them. I see that there's a set of questions by someone called Rathsaran Sirikan. His question, which is open for all three presenters, you can see it under the chat session, is: first, what are the challenges the country you are based in has faced in trying to connect local producers and potential producers in the local energy markets? Second, how does that translate into challenges on the regional and trans-regional level in terms of energy connectivity? Third, what has the government done to address these questions? So maybe we can break these three questions up and the presenters can choose to answer one question, whichever part they are comfortable with. Is there any volunteer? If you like to speak, you can just raise your hand so that I know. Yeah. Okay, Fabio, please go ahead.
Thank you for your insightful question. If you refer to each country, so about Italy, the challenge for Italy is that is, as you know, a geographic hub to develop interconnectivity. Is a kind of bridge between the two shores of the Mediterranean, between North Africa and European Union, but not only, also for interconnectivity for the Southern Gas Corridor from Azerbaijan, also involving the Eastern Mediterranean producers. So the task of my country and the challenges are very great, and the problem is how this role can find a political legitimation in the European Union. I try to better explain. So Italy, of course, is dependent on energy imports, but now there are several projects which converge to Italy, and most of this natural gas will not remain in Italy. So Italy will be a kind of hub to distribute natural gas to the European Union. This is okay, conceiving a European Union energy strategy. The problem is about challenge, about the protection of critical infrastructure, which is another dimension, if you want, another perspective about interconnectivity and protection of infrastructure. So Italy now could be exposed to potential terrorist attack or potential sudden disruption of the energy flows. So it is necessary to try to balance, on the one hand, the energy needs of the European Union as 27 or 28 countries, and on the other hand, how to provide security for this critical infrastructure. Concerning renewable energy sources, only this brief statement. Concerning renewable energy sources, Italy was an Italian scientist created or contributed to create the concentrated solar power technology. But in Italy, he has not chance to develop this technology based on renewable sources, based on solar. He moved to Spain, where developed a lot of CSP solar plants. So the problem is the political will, how the political authorities want to concretely engage in a transition process concerning energy, concerning the use of renewable energy sources, which is a great challenge. But I think that the current energy system imposes to rethink, to retailor the energy needs, and so the energy mix and a complete global energy strategy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, we have lost Konrad. The connection is lost, so he's trying to get back on stage. In the meantime, Helena, is there anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, maybe I can talk a little bit about China. So in China, the main challenge, I guess, is that you have a very diverse country, and you have a rich renewable energy resources in some regions. Northwest, you have a rich wind resources, but then the main centers for where you need the electricity is at the other side of the country. So for China, it was very important to build, and they're still building, the high transmission lines to get the electricity from the northwest to the load centers in the southeast of the country, right? So this is one of the main challenges. Also in China, you need more trading between different provinces to have the system working. For my topic, which is about distributed energy, it can help to produce electricity closer to where it is consumed, so that you don't have to transfer it such a long distance. Yeah, so that's within the country, the main challenges.
Thank you very much. And I suppose in the context of China, we need to also remember that it's really big geographically, and administratively, it's also quite complex because there are all the different provinces. There's the central government and the local government. So even for China itself, the notion of energy market integration is a very big topic, right? Okay, so thank you very much for your response. Konrad is still not back. So I see another question with regards to LNG. That's actually directed to Fabio and Konrad. The question, Fabio, have you seen the question? Is on the chat. Can you turn on your audio, please, Fabio?
That's okay.
Okay, so just in the interest of the participants, I will repeat the question here. Regarding LNG, do you view destination clauses restrictions in LNG contracts as still an impediment to better connectivity in the energy market? So hopefully Konrad comes back and he can answer that as well. And Helena, if you'd like to, you can add something later. But Fabio, please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for this also interesting question. Okay, a short reply is yes, of course. This clauses restriction are some hindrances to a real global interconnectivity, but not only thinking globally, but also in regional terms. If we consider the global energy markets as several sub-regional energy markets, which are, of course, interconnected. But at the same time, I think that business as usual is one of the main driver which will improve or modify the situation. For instance, I think for all the energy analysts, the energy cooperation between the United States and China in order to deliver LNG imports to China is one of the main interesting issues for an energy analyst, because there is, of course, a competition between them, but business as usual. There is the relation between the demand and the offer. So it is important to highlight that there is the possibility to move on in order to improve interconnectivity. And in terms of restriction, I believe that in the sub-regional energy markets, one of the main losers is until now Iran. Iran, you know, that is the second largest natural gas reserves in the world, and the huge potential to develop LNG facilities also outside the Hormuz Strait, which is one of the main energy choke points, as you know. But in the strategy of diversification, Iran, working with China, with needs additional volumes of gas, is working to realize an interesting project, the Jask oil terminal, which is located outside Hormuz, so enhancing global energy security, diversification, developing an alternative route which bypass Hormuz. So even if you should consider the global energy system not only, as I mentioned before, as a kind of sub-regional system, but also considering that the rebalance of the energy system will be driven by the real interest of the involved actors. So even if there are some short-term or long-term restriction on the LNG, the market has the possibility to rebalance and to find the possibility to overcome this restriction. I hope to be able to answer to this insightful question. Thank you.
Thank you. Helena, is there anything you'd like to add to this? No? Okay, so we actually have a question that is for you. If you look under the chat, a large number of electricity in China is produced through coal. Even in my university, a large number of teachers stress the importance of coal. How can China as a large country move its dependence on non-renewable energy to more sustainable energy solutions?
Okay, a very big question. Yeah, China is still very dependent on coal. I think you can already see that the government is pushing towards a higher share of non-renewable energy and towards cleaner coal. Yesterday, Xi Jinping also made new commitments to reach the coal peak before 2030 and to to become carbon neutral until 2060. So I think the central government is definitely pushing towards a more cleaner system. At the same time, of course, you have to keep in mind that energy security is also very important, and the system, even though the technical solutions are there, often there's still some problems how to integrate renewable energy, right? To get enough flexibility into the system. So this is one problem, is we need more flexibility in the system. The other problem, as Christopher said earlier, maybe China looks like a country which is centrally organized and centrally managed, but actually it's a big country with lots of provinces, and all these provinces have also their own interests. The provinces can also allow more coal power plants. So there's a kind of a competition also between the provinces to increase their economic power. So sometimes provinces build more coal power plants, even though it's it's not fitting to the goal of the central government. So I think what helps now to move into more renewable energy is what we already see in China. They're building electricity markets, which makes renewable energy more affordable, and they just show the benefit of renewable energy. So we have 8 spot market trials already in China, and some over provincial trading. So I think we're moving into the right direction, but it's also a long way to go.
Thank you very much for your response. And just to add to that, I would say, at least at the top level of the Chinese government, they have been giving very positive messaging, right? As what Helena mentioned yesterday, when President Xi was at a UN Assembly, giving a UN Assembly speech, he talked about the Green Revolution, with very ambitious targets to achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. And trend, because from 2014, under the current presidency, he has already called for an energy revolution. And then in 2017, that was translated into a policy document, Energy Revolution Strategy for the period 2016 to 2030. And even in that document, there is mention of China's aspiration to be a leader in global energy governance by 2050, right? So you can see that while there are a lot of domestic priorities, the Chinese have also made an effort to connect their agenda with the international community. So I think that is a positive sign. Things may not be linear all the way, but at the very least, we know that in terms of the political direction, it has been set. Fabio, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add about this topic as well with regards to China and coal.
Yes, of course, Helena is completed the statement, but I support your idea, the idea of Xi Jinping, because it's a real challenge, and also we should consider that China is one of the main investors in clean electricity, in renewable energy projects. Of course, the huge energy demand in China cannot allow that also renewable energy sources can meet this growing demand. But it's a real effort of Chinese authorities also to realize the so-called global interconnection with the clean electricity, starting from China to Asian region in order to expand them. Of course, there are the geopolitical rivalries which try to hamper the realization of this project, but it's very important because China is one of the leading economy which want to carefully invest in order to realize, in order to drive this energy transition. So it will be important to monitor Chinese efforts in this sense.
Yes, thank you very much for your response. Unfortunately, I see that we can't get Konrad back online. And also time is up. We are 5 p.m. in Singapore here now, and the networking segment has just opened up. So I think we can carry on this conversation at the networking session, and you are also welcome to contact the speakers individually. If you go to the right-hand column, you see under people, you can contact them directly if you have follow-up questions or comments. So on behalf of the organizers, I apologize for all the technical hiccups, but I'm glad to say that all the presenters presented very well. And, you know, there was the COVID, now we have the technical challenges, but overall, I think in terms of people-to-people exchanges, in terms of academic exchanges, we will still find ways to continue the conversation. And I thank all the speakers and also the participants for attending this session.